Welcome to Modern Day Bereans, a spiritual podcast.
We modern day Bereans. Study the word and seek out the truth. Study to show myself approved. Pastor gotta show proof. Modern day Bereans.
Welcome to any and all. We are Modern Day Bereans. This is episode 2 titled The Way. I am your host, G the Messenger. As always, I give all honor to Yah for his awesomeness and all praise to Yahushua for the Torah, the promises, for the adoption, and for the gospel. What is it that we aim to do? At Modern Day Bereans, we strive to edify and educate the soul with spiritual enlightenment. Our foundation is firmly rooted in the Torah and all divine inspired texts that align with the word of Yah. How do we do this? By being Modern Day Bereans. What's a Berean? They were devout men who studied the word to verify what the apostles came preaching. You can find the story about the Bereans in Acts 17. I am referencing verse 10 and 11. We are also going to prove all things like it says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 21. But before we do so, let's get into a brief recap. In the first episode, we lightly went over the Great Flood from a handful of different accounts, establishing how the whole world talks about it. We found an overwhelming amount of similarities to the biblical account. We established how all these tales that differ come from the people who descend from the people who descend from Noah and where they went. We established Noah and his sons kept the way of Torah and that over time, man was led astray. So, what is the way that Noah kept and how do we prove it? To get a better understanding or to even answer that question, we have to ask ourselves, who was Noah? Noah is a prophet. Noah is the 10th man from Adam. He was born 1,056 years after Adam is created and 126 years after Adam's death. You can check the math on that in Genesis chapter 5, verses 3 through 29. The Torah defines Noah as a righteous man who walked with Yah. Genesis chapter 6 verse 9. I will say that Noah was not only visited by Yah, but would have also been studying the writings from those before him. What are the writings that Noah studied? Enoch, who is the 7th man from Adam, who the Torah also says walked with Yah. Genesis chapter 5 verse 22, was taken 69 years before the birth of Noah. He wrote writings that are referred to today as the Book of Enoch. In his book, he wrote about the heavens and the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, and how they work, which, when compared, you can see this is Genesis chapter 1. He speaks about the watchers like it speaks about in Genesis chapter 6. He gives end-time prophecies like the prophet Isaiah and Ezekiel. In the book of Enoch, chapter 82, verse 22, he can be quoted telling his son Methuselah to preserve his writings and teach them to future generations. Enoch 46, verse 1 and 2 paints the scene with Yah, Yahushua, and Enoch having a conversation. The angel of Yah acknowledges Enoch as a righteous man, supporting Genesis chapter 5 verse 22 that we brought out earlier. And in Romans chapter 7 verse 12 it says that the law is holy, the commandments is holy, righteous, and good. So by biblical definition, Enoch was a man who kept Yah's commandments. In Jasher chapter 3 verse 11, it tells you that Enoch himself taught mankind the ways of Yah. It tells of how kings, princes, and judges all came to seek guidance from Enoch. Hebrews 11:5 says that Enoch pleased Yah. In the book of Jasher chapter 2 verse 10, it speaks of a man named Canaan who is the 4th man from Adam. The chapter goes on to tell of how Canaan, by 40 years old, had knowledge and skill in all wisdom. Verse 12 says he knew of the flood to come, and in verse 13 it says that he wrote these things down on stone tablets. Noah was 179 years old when Canaan died. Jasher chapter 5 verse 2. In verse 9, through 18 of the same chapter, it speaks of Noah and Methuselah, who is the son of Enoch, the one we just mentioned in Enoch 82 verse 2, who was told by his father to preserve and teach future generations. These two are prophesying the flood to come, and they're obviously studying Canaan and Enoch. Noah himself also would have been writing as the Spirit was moving him, and we will bring out a verse soon that supports this claim. Noah at this time is refusing to take a wife and have children because of the judgment coming when Yah comes to him and tells him that he chooses his bloodline to produce seed on the earth. Then Noah takes a wife. Her name is Naamah. It says his firstborn is Shem, then Japheth, then Ham, and it wraps it up by saying that all three went in the ways of Yah, testifying to what I shared in the last episode. We can keep going on and on about Noah, but let's talk about the patriarch Abraham and the way that he kept. In Jubilees 21 verses 1 through 9, Abraham is instructing Isaac, his son, in the ways of Yah. Verses 3 through 5 is the second commandment of no other gods and how he will execute judgment on those who hate him. Verse 6, Abraham is telling Isaac not to drink the blood of any of the animals. This is a dietary law that can be found in Leviticus 7 verse 26. Verses 7 through 9 speak about thanks offerings, peace offerings, meat offerings, and more. An example of a thanks offering can be found in Leviticus 22 verse 29. In verse 10 of Jubilees 21, Abraham can be quoted saying that the things he was teaching Isaac he found in the writings of his forefathers, and he names Enoch and Noah. This is that supporting verse I was talking about that supports my claim when I said that Noah also was writing as the Spirit moved him to do so. I say as the Spirit moved him and they being the prophets, because in 2 Peter chapter 1 it says that there is no private interpretation of the scriptures, and that the prophets spake as they were moved by the Ruach HaKodesh, aka the Holy Spirit. In Jubilees 22 verse 1 it speaks of Isaac and Ishmael keeping the feast of first fruits found in Leviticus 23. This shows us Abraham and Isaac and even Ishmael kept the Torah. But what about Jacob? Did he keep the Torah/law as well? In Genesis 32 verses 24 through 28, Jacob wrestles with Yahushua himself and receives a blessing and a name change from Mashiach. Genesis 48 verses 15 and 16, Jacob is quoted as well saying that Yah is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and that Yah is the same God who delivers him. I know what some will say, that Jubilees, Enoch, and Jasher are not canonical scripture. But the fact is, the book of Jasher is quoted twice in the Bible. Joshua chapter 10 verse 13 and 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 18. Fragments of the book of Enoch were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran. The link is in the description box. And Jubilees 21 says verbatim the teachings and instructions found in multiple chapters of Leviticus. These books were originally in the Bible but were removed, and according to Wikipedia.com, by 1647, what is known as the Apocrypha had been excluded by the Protestant Church. All verses we brought out line up and testify to the same thing that the Bible speaks of. This gives us clear indication of the written law being present before Noah, a witness to our claim that Noah was studying the Bible in his day. I have also provided a link to an article written by Don Stewart on BlueLetterBible.com, where he explains why the Protestant Church rejects the Apocrypha. In my opinion, he is really reaching in his logic. Their whole claim is based on a false narrative constructed by a lack of understanding and personal emotion. I am not saying that in a belittling way. At the bottom of the article, you can find a link to Don Stewart's website where you can go to see his credentials. They are quite accomplished. Now, let's jump over to the times of Moses and the 12 tribes and see how they were doing things. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 and 13, Moses is telling Israel to walk in the way which is to love Yah and serve Yah with all of our being. In verse 13, he tells us how to love Yah, which is keeping his commandments. Isaiah 56 verse 2 says, "Blessed is the man who keeps the Sabbath and keeps his hand from doing evil." I am paraphrasing, but this verse is referencing the Sabbath, which is the fourth commandment. James chapter 1 verse 22 says, "Be you doers of the word and not just hearers only, deceiving yourselves." Again, I am paraphrasing a couple of these verses for a shorter version, and I want to be clear on that, so make sure you go and look these up. We have presented this claim with 2 to 3 witnesses and many more, as the scriptures commands us, and by doing so, we are demonstrating how someone in 2021 can be walking in the way. The law, prophets, and the letters of the apostles define the way as walking in his love, serving Yah with all of our heart and soul, keeping his commandments. Walking in his love. What does that look like? Merriam-Webster defines love as 1. A strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties. 2. Attraction based on sexual desire, affection, and tenderness felt by lovers. 3. Affection based on admiration, benevolence, or common interests. Remember, these are man's definitions of love. The biblical definition of love can be found in 1 John chapter 5 verse 3, and it says, "For this is the love of Yah, that we keep his commandments." Instantly, I see 2 different understandings of the word love, and we will dive more into that in episode 3. 1 John 2 verse 6 states, "We ought to walk in the same manner as he did, he being Mashiach, which we know he kept the commandments and abided in Yah's love," says John 15 verse 10. In 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, the apostle Paul states to follow him as he follows Mashiach, and it makes sense because red letter Mashiach himself in John 14 verse 6 is quoted saying, "I am the way." According to the biblical scholars in the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, it defines love as the very nature of Yah. Yah is love, 1 John 4 verse 8, and he is all the fruits of the Spirit: joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, meekness, and self-control. Against such there is no law. Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 23. Also, according to the scholars, in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary under the 4 Gospels, it says it contains facts about the life of Yahushua, who everyone calls Jesus. The letters of the apostles again just confirm that walking in all the fruits of the Spirit, that is, Yah's Spirit of course, is the way, because when you're doing so, you are walking perfectly. In Deuteronomy 18 verse 13, it states, "You shall be perfect with the Most High your Yah," and it's repeated in Matthew 5 verse 48 when it says, "Be you perfect." Colossians chapter 3 verse 14 says that love is the bond of perfectness. Our last verse to reference walking in his love is Romans 13:10, and it reads, "Love works no ill towards his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the Torah." Romans 13:10 puts it perfect when it says that love is the fulfillment of the Torah, and this is a clear supporting verse of Deuteronomy 10 verses 12 and 13. Serving Yah with all our heart and soul. What does it mean to serve Yah? Some of my favorite verses on this matter is Romans 12 9 through 13. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. Serve the Most High. Be joyful in hope. Patient in affliction. Faithful in prayer. Share with the Most High's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. You gotta love it. Another favorite of mine in this chapter is verse 2. I strongly recommend that you look it up and read it for yourself. Now, let's wrap up Romans 12. First thing I notice right away is that word love again. We already established what love means according to Yah, and when you get into the context of the entire chapter, it's going over how to serve Yah. In 1 Chronicles 28 verse 9, King David, speaking to his son Solomon, instructs him to devote himself with a willing mind, and in Hebrews 9 verse 14 it states that we should cleanse our conscience from acts that lead to death so we may serve Yah. Another 3 witnesses which indicate that serving Yah means to have a clear conscience, a willing mind, and obedience to the will of Yah, aka the commandments. Some facts about the Torah. There is a total of 613 commandments. They have never changed. Some apply to all people, like the famous 10 commandments. Some apply just to men and some just to women. You have some civil law, you have some dietary law, and you got some sacrificial law, and these are just a few of them. There are many more man-made laws than biblical laws, and just in man-made traffic laws alone, that tops the 613 that don't even apply to every individual. Go figure. Now, the best verse I think we can use to wrap up this episode is John 14:6 that says, Yahushua answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, I don't know what else we could say or how much more we can go on. We've gone all the way back to the 4th man from Adam with Canaan, writing things down. We talked about the 7th man from Adam, Enoch, who wrote things down. We talked about the 10th man, who was Noah. We talked about the descendants of Enoch, and the list just goes on and on. So I guess with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this time to say thank you again for spending some time with me. And if you enjoy what you're listening to, make sure you like, subscribe, and click on the bell to get notifications on all the new content when it drops. Until the next time, I am your host, G the Messenger, and this has been another episode of Modern Day Bereans, a spiritual podcast.
We modern day Bereans. Study the word and seek out the truth. Study to show myself approved. Pastor gotta show proof. Modern day Bereans. Many will come in the name. This is the warning given by the king. I ain't afraid, man, state your claim. Cause we modern day Bereans. We gon' lift it up in prayer. We gon' take it back to the book. We gon' test every word. Truth or lie, man, why? Cause we are modern day Bereans. Don't trust what the church say. Been lying since my childhood days. Most of what they say ain't written on the page. We are modern day Bereans.